My name is Nick B, and let's jump into this week's futures overview. So, starting with the Forex economic calendar, Monday we don't have much going on. Tuesday, ISM services PMI at 10. Wednesday, we have ADP non-farm employment change. 10 a.m. Fed Chair Powell testifies, JOLTS job openings. We're going to get some volatility then. Thursday, unemployment claims. Fed Chair again at 10 a.m. Meister's not too big of an event. Friday at 8:30 non-farm employment change unemployment rate. So it's going to be a very interesting week, given the last 2 weeks where we've had some hot numbers coming in on PPI, CPI. So let's see what the price action is telling us ultimately. Again, I don't really like to listen to news or have a form of bias around news events, so I rather see the reaction before the prediction, but at least I could map out, a bit of a roadmap to what could play out, and depending on, what breaks out, breaks down, we'll go from there. So as always, starting with ES, let's blow this up on the daily real quick. Okay, 3 year real quick. So 4808 was right over here, ways away where we already broke out. Our breakout level was ultimately the platform at 4842, holding this move up. We never really retested it, so if we do see a correction at some point, I would imagine it would be towards this area here. Okay. As you can see also, my 20-day EMA has been pretty much supporting this rise on price action on the daily this whole time since really December. We've been bought here at 47.70, at 48.60, 49.50 area we got bought up. And now, we just broke above 50.63 on the last session, solidified it as support with last week's retest, and a complete sword job, breaking the all-time highs over at 51. It was 51.23 and a half or and a quarter, but whatever. We broke those highs and we ultimately reached our first target of 51.50, just 75, 3 ticks off, but it's basically right there. So what are we to expect now? Well, on the daily, again, I can't plot too much. We don't really have a clear channel here just yet. I'm definitely going to have to break it down to our lower time frame, to the 4 hour right now, but definitely 41.25. I just want to set that up because, if we do end up breaking above it, 41.50 ultimately, and we hold it, I would target honestly definitely 51.60, but ultimately I think 5200 is right around the corner. Literally, we're right there. So one second, 51.49 and a quarter. That's where we want this level at. Okay, again, I can't plot out too much. I could kind of plot this 50.68 level, but we're going to take a better look at it right now on the 4 hour anyway. Okay, so here we have it. We have our higher lows being formed, higher highs, right? So the trend is definitely bullish here on the big picture. So let me go ahead and plot off this base right here, and that was at 50.65. All right, roughly that area. You can see when we broke out of it, we got a nice retest, solidified it as support, and now we're hanging out in this area. Can we revisit the wick of 51.23 and a quarter, which was our previous all-time high? And again, we did gap up into the session, so let's see. Maybe into Monday we open up higher, maybe not. Let's see. I would tread carefully just for now. I'm gonna still rely on the 20-day, on the 4 hour as well as our support. So it says that a possibility of a pullback towards 5100 to kind of, I guess, if maybe we see profit taking or a little bit of an intraday switch, maybe to test some supports, I would expect price to be at 5100, and then maybe we get a bounce. Ultimately, if we want to short this, we got to get below 50.60. So I'm going to place an alert here at 50. I guess I'll do 50.65 for now, but ultimately the breakdown is going to be 50.60, and we can take a chance at shorting it as long as price can stay below it. So right here, once this alert goes off, I'm going to look at the possibility of shorting it. And, honestly, I think the first downside target would be 49.60, this previous higher low here. A break below that, we'll probably revisit the higher low of 49.40. Below that, I expect us to really get to 4,900. And if we break below 4,900, then we might see some spillage. But again, what are the odds that doesn't happen? We'll see. We have a fundamentally heavy week, so that's what I'm looking at towards the downside. Again, the possibility of us coming down to 51.23, just a retest of the previous session highs. Yes, that's possible and we bounce, but I'd feel a little more comfortable if we see just a bit of a heavier pullback. We'll see. You know, on the 1 hour, let's take a look what we got going on. Okay, so we're at the highs basically. We had a gap up. Okay, so it's either we on the intraday are going to start breaking below 51.38 and a quarter, maybe come down to the platforms of 51.23, roughly this area. Yeah, I would say the 20-day on the 1 hour lining up to 51.23. So maybe we pull back to here, and if we can keep a hold of this area as support, I don't see why they don't buy this move back up. But definitely looking at buying the dips moving forward for now. Again, got to consider, news events. I heavily suggest waiting for a reaction before trading a bias on it. And that's ultimately what we'll be doing. Again, in terms of upside, for us to signal, a break of 51.50, that is, I don't know. You're kind of asking for it. I'm a little bit, hesitant on that, but something I might keep in mind if we can play that into overnight, into Monday's open session. Maybe we'll keep an eye out. We'll see what we get. But an upside, again, I wouldn't look straight for breakouts right now. I would look for specifically pullbacks. Get me a pullback of 51.23. Let me see how we hold, or 5100 ultimately. The higher low on the 1 hour here is 50.90, and a break of 50.90 on the intraday would probably bring us back down to 50.65. So I don't want to guess. I want to see what happens when we visit these areas. But again, on the bigger time frames in terms of direction, either we breach 50.60 and we look at shorting towards the previous higher lows, or we ultimately do break above 51.50, make it a support, just like we did at 51.23, this platform, and we go higher. So that's all we got on ES. Let's pull up NQ. NQ's a heck of a mover. So if the market really starts moving nicely, we're going to see some really cool intraday moves. Again, same thing, just like on ES, 4808 was my marker back way back when. On NQ, it's 16,763, 767 really. But again, no point in plotting it here. It does not make sense because, you know, just like on ES where we had 40, 48, 42, 4840, that area holding as support for NQ, the platform that's ultimately holding this move up right now is 17,165. So similarly to yes, if we were to see a pullback right now off the highs and head lower, I would not be surprised to see, in correction territory, maybe a pullback to 48.40, 48.42, something like that. 4,800, that's steep. We might have to look at now shorting the rips. But again, no tell yet. For all we know, this could chop, all the way into May or June, and then only in the summer we get a bit of a move, and then fall season again that might be chop pullback territory. We'll see. That's too far to account for now. Let's focus on the now. So I'm gonna mark off definitely 17,165 as a support here. Let's go ahead to that, and let's make it yellow. So if that breaks, might be a trend change. Might be definitely heading lower, but we'll see. So that's the platform for support. On the big picture, we are basically at our all-time high, so I can't really plot resistance. I do see some room over here of being a support at 18,145, 18,144, which was last week's session high. So let me just for now create an alert. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. At or below. Okay. So the channel we see clearly is from 18,145 down to 17,165. That I wouldn't trust the pullbacks to 17,384 or the pullbacks down to 17,815. That would be the beginning, and we're definitely on the signal side. We're gonna scalp those moves, but in terms of direction, I would not trust those levels because there would definitely be a chance they get bought back up unless we have some kind of black swan event or something heavy that can convince, the market to start selling off. VIX hasn't exactly been on a tear to the upside towards fear levels either, so I'm keeping an eye on that. Definitely puts are pretty, I would say, pretty cheap up here, but come on, the trend is your friend. We pull this up on the daily. I mean, ultimately, it's clearly telling us since the last platform that kind of was quote unquote breakout was 17,165. So if we do end up coming down to that area, if we fail to bounce, cool. Now we know the direction is definitely going to be trending lower down towards 16,700 first, and then below that we can target the previous higher lows of 16,325. If that does break, if we do end up bouncing, easy, you buy the dip and you climb it back up at least towards the 20-day on the daily and wait for that to break out. But again, this is all just hypothetical talk, to be honest. For now, my focus is, are we going to pull back to 18,144 and bounce off of that area to solidify it as support, or do we have room to revisit 17,900? And 17,900 was that level I was talking about last week where, if the bears cannot get us below it ultimately to retrace, I believe this was what, PPI, CPI, this pull up, if we cannot retrace that to at least retest, or was it the Nvidia earnings? I think, yeah, I think the Nvidia earnings on Wednesday, that's what took this higher here. If we can't at least retest those levels, how do we know, we can continue higher? So that's the only thought in the back of my head. So if we do pull back to 17,900 and it holds, wonderful, we can buy that back up and ride the wave higher. If for whatever reason we start pushing higher, the only thing I could say is, I mean, let's take a look at it on the smaller time frames, on the 4 hour. So the 4 hour, your support is at 18,100. Not good enough. It's too high right here. Let's go on the 1 hour really quick. Okay, we had a gap up again. Doesn't look like we're slowing down just yet. Let me just place an alert at 18,372.75. If you can't beat them, join them, right? So that should be, yeah, perfect. So if this alert breaks out overnight and we do start climbing higher, I mean, we're right next to 18,400. That's a psychological resistance level. But I'll be honest, guys, similar to ES, where I see the possibility of us seeing 5,200. Definitely, it's definitely on the table. With NQ, I was saying 18.5 is kind of the most realistic target, after we get above 18.2 at least, and that seems to be the case that's playing out now. So if into overnight we get to 400, we can hold it, great. Maybe we take a shot at it long towards 18.5 with tight stops. But at the same time, you got to be thinking, man, what if they sell this, right? We gotta at least think a little bit about the red team. If they do sell this, where's a proper entry? Is it maybe below here of 18,300? Yeah, if we can ultimately get below 18,300, do we just come back 100, 150 points to the downside to solidify some supports and then bounce? If you take that trade, that's tough. That's real tough because the risk of you getting bounced at 300 is there. The risk of you getting bounced at 250 is there. Just because, in this new price discovery area, price is probably going to be a little more reactive to psychological, round numbers such as 200, 250, 300. So let's see. Let's see. I'm very interested in seeing Monday's open. I want to know how the market sentiment is right now because it's tough to tell. We can't really identify it yet. We're very elevated. We're still up basically back on where we closed on Friday. Now it's a matter of, do we pull back or is the auto printer just on now? If that's the case, great. We can intraday trade this all the way to the upside easily and move those stops right behind us. But I can't rush, something right now. So again, I think if we do get above 18,372 into the overnight, that could be a nice shot at a long, but those stops have to be so tight, guys. That's the only risk. It's almost like a suicide mission, because you basically got to front 30, 40 points in an attempt to possibly scale 100, 120 points up towards 18,400, 18,500. That's tough. That's tough. You got to babysit the trade. I mean, we'll see. I think the sentiment is really going to pour out into Monday's open. We'll really know what's what. Do we really get to pull back, or are we really serious about breaking out? I definitely am going to give it till the 10 a.m. churn too, because the risk of reversals in this market overall has been pretty heavy. So I know quite a few traders that got burned. I also got burned in some instances because, when it's time to cut, you got to cut the trade. So again, right now, this is kind of limbo territory. We have to wait. Again, if 18,145 starts breaking down to the downside, let's cover this again. We'll come down to 18,000, probably 1830, I want to say. Below 18,030, I would expect to see, honestly, 17,900. That is our absolute, support level on NQ. If that decides to break, well, there's a really good chance we start retracing our moves, targeting previous higher lows. And the next one to the downside is really 17,400, 17,380. So other than that, we'll see what we get. Uh, have a solid trading week ahead. Be careful of the news events and reaction over prediction. So have a great trading week ahead, and I'll catch you onto the Discord. Cheers.